In the medieval world, sleep was not expected to last from bedtime to dawn. Night unfolded in stages. People slept, woke, and slept again, without anxiety or urgency. This rhythm was not a medical problem or a cultural oddity. It was a practical response to long darkness, weak light, and lives governed by daylight rather than clocks. In medieval Europe, night was not something people tried to fill or escape. It was something they endured and adapted to. Artificial light existed, but it was weak, expensive, and unevenly available. Candles required wax or tallow. Oil lamps needed fuel, and both demanded resources that many households could not spare for long hours of wakefulness. As a result, darkness defined the rhythm of evening life rather than convenience or preference. Winter nights stretched far beyond modern expectations. In northern regions, darkness could last 14 hours or more. Remaining awake through that span would have been impractical, exhausting, and wasteful. Instead of forcing continuous activity, people allowed sleep to expand and divide. Going to bed shortly after sunset was not a sign of idleness, but a rational response to limited light and long nights. Sleep adjusted itself to the environment. Rather than compressing rest into a single block, medieval households spread it across the night. This arrangement conserved energy and aligned bodily rhythms with seasonal darkness. What strikes me most is how little this system relied on discipline or self-control. Sleep patterns were shaped less by personal choice than by surroundings. It reminds me that what we often treat as a personal failure today, sleeping early, waking at night, was once simply a natural response to the world as it was. Most medieval people did not wait for midnight to sleep. They went to bed soon after darkness settled, often finishing the day's labour physically depleted. The first sleep began early in the evening and was typically the heaviest phase of rest. Sources describe it as deep, still, and restorative, closely tied to bodily exhaustion rather than mental relaxation. This first sleep usually lasted several hours. It absorbed the accumulated fatigue of daylight work, farming, carrying water, cooking, repairing, or tending animals. Because labour was physical and daylight bound, the body entered rest quickly once activity stopped. There was little need for deliberate winding down. Importantly, this phase of sleep did not aim to last until morning. It was not designed to be complete. Instead, it served as the body's first response to darkness and tiredness. Waking after it was not seen as interruption or failure, but as part of the night's expected structure. I find it telling that sleep followed exhaustion rather than a clock. There was no fixed bedtime to meet, no expectation to stay asleep. The body dictated the rhythm. To me, this suggests a relationship with rest that was practical, responsive, and far less anxious than what many people experience today. After the first sleep ended, many medieval people woke naturally. This waking period did not signal distress or insomnia. It was expected, even familiar. Accounts from medical texts, letters, and later recollections suggest that people remained awake for 1 to 2 hours before returning to bed. The night was quiet, still, and largely free of demands. This interval was not rushed. Without clocks or schedules pressing down on the mind, wakefulness did not carry urgency. Darkness remained, but it was a known condition rather than an obstacle to be overcome. People did not assume that waking at night meant something had gone wrong. Crucially, this period existed within a broader understanding of balance. Sleep was not measured by uninterrupted duration, but by overall restoration across the night. As long as rest accumulated, division was not a problem. To me, this suggests that wakefulness was not feared in the way it often is today. Modern sleep culture tends to treat night waking as a failure that must be corrected. The medieval experience hints at a calmer relationship with the body, one that allowed alertness without panic and silence without pressure. During this waking interval, activity remained light and restrained. People prayed, reflected, or spoke quietly with those nearby. In some households, fires were checked, tools adjusted, or animals tended if needed. Others simply lay awake, resting without the expectation of immediate sleep. Bright light was unnecessary and often unavailable. A small flame, if used at all, was enough. The goal was not productivity, but continuity, maintaining warmth, awareness, and readiness without exhausting energy reserves. This period did not resemble modern nighttime leisure. There was no stimulation designed to delay sleep or demand attention. Activities were calm, repetitive, and easily set aside. When tiredness returned, people went back to bed without resistance. I'm struck by how mentally active yet physically restrained this time appears. Reflection and awareness existed without overexertion. It makes me think that the boundary between rest and activity was more fluid. Night was not divided into on and off, but managed carefully, with attention to limits rather than efficiency. After the quiet waking period, people returned to bed for what was often called the second sleep. This phase began later in the night and differed in character from the first. It was usually lighter, shorter, and more fragmented. Rather than sinking into deep rest, the body hovered closer to wakefulness. The second sleep functioned as a bridge. It carried people toward morning rather than away from the day just lived. As dawn approached, sleep loosened gradually. People often woke before full daylight, not abruptly but in stages. There was no sharp boundary between sleep and rising. This gradual ending mattered. Without alarms or fixed start times, waking could follow natural cues: cooling air, shifting light, distant sounds of animals or neighbours stirring. Sleep ended when the body felt ready, not when time demanded it. It seems to me that waking gently mattered more than sleeping deeply. The structure of the night allowed rest to taper rather than snap, compared to modern routines that force sudden awakening. This slower transition feels intentional, even protective, as if the night was designed to release people back into the day with care. Daily work in the medieval world began with light, not with a clock. Farming, construction, travel and domestic labour depended on visibility. Sleep patterns adjusted to this reality. The two-part night aligned rest with daylight availability rather than attempting to override it. Because work followed the sun, there was little need to force the body into rigid schedules. Seasonal variation was accepted. Winter encouraged longer nights and more rest, while summer compressed sleep naturally. The body followed external cues, light, temperature, sound, without constant correction. No alarms were needed. Morning arrived gradually, and activity resumed when conditions allowed. This rhythm reduced friction between sleep and obligation. The day unfolded when it could. I find it revealing how little effort was spent forcing the body to conform. Instead of disciplining sleep into a fixed shape, medieval life adapted around it. It makes me wonder how many modern sleep problems arise not from the body itself, but from the constant demand to override environmental signals in favour of artificial ones. Medieval sleep did not follow a single universal pattern. What survives in historical sources are tendencies rather than strict rules. Habits differed between rural villages and dense towns, between monasteries and family households, and across regions with different climates. Occupation mattered as well. A shepherd, a baker and a night watchman could not share the same rhythm. Seasonal change further complicated matters. Long winter nights encouraged extended and divided sleep, while summer shortened darkness and compressed rest. Even within the same community, age and health likely shaped how people experienced the night. This variation is important. It prevents us from treating segmented sleep as a fixed prescription. Medieval people were not following a doctrine of two sleeps. They were responding flexibly to conditions around them. I think recognizing variation makes this history more realistic. It resists the temptation to turn the past into a lifestyle model. Instead of offering a rule to imitate, it shows adaptation in motion. People adjusting rest as circumstances shifted, rather than insisting on one correct way to sleep. Despite being divided, medieval sleep was not necessarily shorter. Total rest across the night often matched or exceeded modern averages. The difference lay in structure, not in quantity. Sleep was spread out rather than compressed. Fatigue was managed through balance. Work intensity, daylight hours, and food availability all shaped how tired people became. Health was understood as maintaining equilibrium rather than maximizing output. Continuous sleep was not the standard by which rest was judged. This perspective challenges modern assumptions. Fragmentation is often equated with deficiency, but historical evidence suggests otherwise. As long as the body recovered, division was acceptable. What stands out to me is how easily modern assumptions can mislabel older practices. We often project contemporary anxieties backward, interpreting difference as dysfunction. Medieval sleep reminds us that rest has many viable forms, and that uninterrupted sleep is not the only path to restoration. The gradual spread of artificial lighting reshaped the night. Candles became cheaper, oil lamps more efficient, and eventually gas and electric light extended usable hours after sunset. Darkness no longer dictated behaviour as strictly as before. As nights shortened in practice, sleep patterns adjusted. Staying awake later became possible, and the need to divide rest across long hours of darkness faded. Over time, continuous sleep emerged not because it was inherently better, but because the environment allowed it. This shift was slow and uneven. Rural areas adopted new lighting later than cities. Seasonal variation persisted. Still, the underlying logic changed. Sleep began to serve schedules and productivity rather than responding primarily to night length. This makes me think that what we call normal sleep is historically fragile. It rests on technology, not biology alone. When light changes, expectations change with it. What feels natural today may only be stable as long as the conditions that support it remain in place. Medieval two-cycle sleep was not a curiosity or a lost wisdom to romanticize. It was a practical arrangement shaped by darkness, labor, and limited control over the night. People did not attempt to conquer sleep or discipline it into a single form. Instead, they organized life around its natural rhythms. This history does not argue that the past slept better. It shows that the rest adapts. Human rhythms have always been flexible, responding to light, work, and expectation. This story reminds me that rest does not have one correct shape. Waking at night does not automatically signal failure. In a modern world that often treats sleep as something to optimize or perform, there may be value in remembering that human bodies have long negotiated rest with patience rather than pressure. Sometimes allowing rhythm to unfold is itself a form of care.